I've pulled over just the variable state, and this is from that data set dealing with customer credit card values or charges. And so I've pulled just the state variable over so we can focus in on that and look at how we go about actually creating those frequency tables and relative frequency tables. So we talked about those briefly in a little chalkboard video, and now we're going to see how we can have Excel do that for us. And then eventually we'll look also at how do we take that information and create a bar chart and pie charts. So we have the state variable in front of us, and so how do we build a frequency table? So I am going to so I'm gonna put in a table here. So frequency table. Already had some. Let's see. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna build a frequency table, and I'm going to. So I'm gonna want state and number of customers. I already had some formatting in here. That's why it's popping up that way. It was already preset that way. I'm going to, so I just want this header to kind of stick with so we remember what it is. And so to get it more in line, I'm going to go ahead and merge and center this just to pull it in. So now this is treated as one cell. Yeah, so that's in the home and merge and center. And you can always unmerge it if you want to get rid of that. So we, having watched the previous video, we know the 4 states that are in our data set here. If we didn't, we could go ahead and just kind of scan through here and say, okay, we've seen Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and then continue to look down, see if there's any more that we've missed. That's not too bad, especially when there's only 30 observations, but what if you have 300 observations? Okay, that's going to be pretty time consuming. So a few tips or tricks to make that go quicker. One thing you can do is use the remove duplicates function, and so I'm going to copy this because I don't want to do that with my actual data. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste it over here. So I have another set here. I'm going to grab my data, or this pseudo data, the copy here, and I'm going to go up to the data tab, and I'm going to remove duplicates. Okay, so this is going to take any duplicate rows out of there. When I do that, it's going to ask me, okay, are you sure which one do you want? I'm going to tell it that my data has headers, and then go ahead and click OK. And now it tells me, okay, we found 26 duplicates and the 4 remain. That should make sense because we have 30 observations. Everything should either be the unique or a duplicate. And so I'm left with just the 4 options here. So now I'm going to go ahead and just drag that over. I don't know why it yelled at me there, but I'm going to drag that over. I'm going to go over here and just align this to the right so that it gets under the state better. So that was obviously much easier than going through the whole list of potentially 300, right? And so again, that was up in the data and remove duplicates. But again, let me warn you, you don't want to do that with your actual data. Okay, so now we need to do the number of customers. In the chalkboard video, I just made up the numbers. Okay, obviously we can't do that for real. And so how do we go about counting these? And again, what we're basically doing is counting up however many Minnesotas there are. So at the baseline, we could just go ahead and say, here's 1, here's 2, 3, 4, 5, and keep counting. And then do that for Wisconsin, Iowa, and North Dakota. That's not great, right? It'll work, but there's probably an easier way. And in fact, let's go ahead and use that. So we can use a function or a formula in Excel. And we're going to have Excel count if. Okay, and if that might be hard to see, but it says counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. Okay, so after we've named we've chosen, so count ifs we'll use in the future as well. They both work, but we can just use count if. And now, so Excel is always going to try to help you along the way. So it's telling me what it needs. It needs the range, and then it needs the criteria. And the range is just the area or the cells over which we want it to look. So we're going to have it look over this area. So we want it to look within the state variable. So that state variable is all of these entries. Okay, and again, going back to your Excel training, you should start to be familiar with that. That's going to give us B2 to B31, right? And that colon in there tells Excel it's all of the values in between. So what we're saying, the range here is B2 to B31. We want Excel to look over that range. So it's going to basically, you could think of Excel as going to go through each and every entry in this range and look for something. What is it going to look for? Well, we're going to tell it what to look for in the criteria. So notice it says range, comma, criteria. So everything we put before the comma is the range. Then we hit comma, and now we need to give it the criteria. What is the criteria? We want it to look for Minnesota. Okay, and it's down here underneath this. It should say D5, and I think it's behind the little thing. So, and I'm going to finish this with a closed bracket. Okay, there's my D5, right? And so now it's going to go every one of these cells in the range. It's going to look and say, hey, is D5 or MN, is that in there? And if it's in there, it's going to count it as yes. If not, it's going to count it as no. So when I hit enter here, hopefully, it'll pop up and it says 10. And as we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that checks out. Okay. Obviously, that's different than what I did on the chalkboard because, again, I just made up numbers. We probably don't. Well, we can fix this later. So in Wisconsin, let's go ahead and do this again. I'm going to just expand this a little bit so we see the full equation. So count if, and then we want the range. And we don't have to drop and drag. If we know what it is, I can just type in B2 to B31, and it kind of tells it, or it shows us on the screen. Okay, and then comma, and now the criteria this time we want it to be Wisconsin, or D6. I'm going to close that bracket, and when I hit enter, I see that there's 8. And we'll do it one more time. So I'm going to use count if. I'm going to do, so this time I'm going to lock in. So I'm going to do B2 to B31. But remember, these dollar signs in here lock it in. So now, so I'll tell you why I do that in a second here, but let's finish this out. And I'm going to do D7. I'm not going to lock D7 in. I'm going to hit enter, and we get 4. So what this allows me to do is grab this and pull it down. And now I know that there are 8 from North Dakota. Okay, and so why did I not have to retype that? Well, if you look at the differences between the two formulas here, when I drug it down, all that changed is D8 updated. Okay, so Excel works pretty hard at trying to figure out what you're trying to do, and it can tell that when I pull this down, I want it to update to the new line. So this cell E7 referenced D7. And so Excel is understanding that when I pull down to E8, I want it to reference D8. The reason I need to lock in these, so actually let me mess this up. If I take these dollar signs out of here, okay, and now I pull down, it probably will give me the right answer. It gives me 8, but if I click back in here, notice what's happened. We've actually shifted the whole area down. The range has shifted down as well, because as I've moved from E7 to E8, Excel pulled everything down. Okay, so to counteract that, we can instead lock these in with the $sign, and now it tells Excel, if I ever drag or alter anything based on this one, don't update that 2 or that 31. Okay, and so now when we click back in, it's got the right range. So we have now a frequency table. Good practice to get into, right? And often a helpful visual anyway is to say, okay, what is the total of all of these? And so we can use the sum formula here. And Excel is telling me it just needs some numbers. Okay, so it wants number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and that should sum up to 30. Now, these are all giving me a decimal point. I don't actually want that. So I can adjust that. If I right-click here, I'm going to go ahead and format cells. So I've got the data selected. I'm right-clicking, format cells, and I don't want that decimal place. Okay, so we're in number, but I'm going to just take the decimal place away, and now it's a little cleaner. Okay, what about a relative frequency? Well, it turns out that doing that little total line here at the bottom is helpful. I'm just going to draw a little line here to separate it. And this total is helpful because I can just use that in my relative frequency calculation. Because remember, relative frequency is all about the number from your frequency table divided by the total. So how do we do that? Well, we can just enter it in if we know what it is, or do 10 equals 10 divided by 30. That would work. But we can have Excel do most of the work for us if we do equals E5 divided by E9. That's going to give me 0.3. Now, just like we did with the formulas here, we can pull this down. And I'm going to do that, and let's see if you can guess what's going to happen. So I'm going to get an error, right? And so it's telling me that I'm dividing by 0. Why am I dividing by 0? Well, I did E5 divided by E9, and then I pulled it down. I did not lock anything in. Okay, so I need, when we're working with formulas in Excel, it's always helpful to think ahead of what we're going to want to do, and build it in there. Okay, so I'm gonna lock in E9, and notice I don't want to lock in E5. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. If I lock in E5 and I pull this down, I get 0.3 again, and that, of course, is still the same calculation that I just did. I don't want that. I only want to lock in the E9. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, I only want to lock in E9. I want the E5 to update. I want this now to pull from E6. Oh, so what's happening here? Well, those are both roughly 0.3, and I probably should have noticed right away that 10 out of 30 is not 0.3. So what's going on? Well, we need to format these cells and give it a little more, a few more decimal points to work with. So we see now that this is 1/3, which we should have picked up on right away. This is 0.333, and so on. Okay, and so that is, and again, we can test just to make sure if we use sum up these variables, and we don't have to click them all in. We can just drag and give it a range. and we see that it's 1.0. So we can, that we have 100% of them shown. So that walks us through frequency tables and relative frequency table. Okay, again, the big formula that we're using here is count if, and you'll see that come up, but you'll use it quite a few times. So again, count if, and we're grabbing range and criteria. So we're having it say, hey, go find where Minnesota is. How many times does Minnesota show up in this list? It looks, Excel largely just works one by one, and it scans through the whole list and counts it up, and that spits it out for us. Okay, so we'll come back with a video, and we'll see that it's quite easy to take this information and put it into a visual format through a bar chart or a pie chart, especially for using the relative frequency. So we'll be back with that video next.